Avoidants do not always realize what they had while they still have it. In many cases, closeness feels far more frightening to them than distance ever does. Real intimacy asks them to lower emotional defenses they spent years building. It asks them to stay present during vulnerability instead of escaping from it. So they pull away, they disconnect. They convince themselves space will solve the pressure building inside them. But eventually, the silence they created begins forcing reflection they spent so long avoiding. And sometimes that becomes the deepest heartbreak of all. Because the emotional understanding arrives too late. Long after the ignored messages. Long after the emotional distance. Long after the person who loved them stopped trying to fight for connection alone. Many avoidants eventually become emotionally available enough to understand exactly what they lost. They finally recognize the loyalty, patience, and emotional safety someone tried to give them. They finally see the damage caused by their coldness, their disappearing acts, and their inability to stay emotionally close when things became real. And sometimes the greatest punishment for an avoidant is finally becoming emotionally available after the person who loved them is already gone. Because healing changes people, pain changes people. The person who once waited desperately for love slowly becomes someone who no longer needs it from the same source. And that realization can stay with an avoidant for a very long time. Not every breakup ends the day two people separate. Some endings happen much later, quietly, internally, in the middle of an ordinary night when the avoidant suddenly feels the full weight of the heartbreak they caused. When the memories return without distraction. When the silence becomes impossible to escape, when they finally understand how deeply someone loved them after that person already learned how to live without them. If this video connected with something you personally lived through, share your experience in the comments below. Your story may help someone else feel less alone in their healing journey. And if you enjoy deep relationship psychology and emotional insight like this, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and stay with us for more powerful videos about love, attachment, and human behavior. One of the saddest parts of avoidant attachment is how delayed their emotional processing can become. Many avoidants do eventually reconnect emotionally with the relationship, but it usually happens far later than people expect. While the other person is forced to face the heartbreak immediately, the avoidant often experiences it in reverse. First comes distance, then numbness, then distraction, and only after enough time passes does the emotional reality finally begin reaching them fully. Sometimes that process takes months, sometimes years. By the time they understand the depth of the pain they caused, life has already changed for the person they left behind. This is why avoidants often return too late. They reconnect emotionally after the relationship is no longer emotionally available to them. Earlier, when love was still present and accessible, closeness felt overwhelming. But once the connection is truly gone, the fear slowly turns into grief. The silence becomes heavier. The memories become more emotional. They begin seeing the relationship with a clarity they never had while they were inside it. And eventually, many of them feel the urge to reconnect. Some send a message after months of silence. Some suddenly check in emotionally. Others quietly return through small conversations, indirect contact, or emotional curiosity after disappearing for a very long time. But the tragedy is that by the time they fully understand your pain, you have already started healing. The version of you they remember no longer exists anymore. The person who once waited desperately for their attention slowly learned how to survive without it. The emotional dependence faded little by little. The anxiety that once kept you emotionally attached started losing its grip. You stopped waking up hoping for their message. You stopped over-explaining your feelings. You stopped trying to earn emotional consistency from someone unable to provide it. The person who waited for them eventually learned how to live without them, and that realization can feel deeply painful for avoidants because they often return expecting to find the same emotional access they left behind. They remember your patience, your openness, your emotional availability. But healing changes attachment in powerful ways. Pain creates emotional clarity. Over time, people begin recognizing how much of themselves they abandoned while trying to hold the relationship together. The chasing energy slowly disappears, the emotional urgency fades, and the silence that once felt unbearable becomes peaceful instead. That shift is difficult for avoidants to fully understand at first because they are reconnecting emotionally while the other person is finally detaching emotionally. The timelines no longer match. One person is just beginning to feel the loss while the other has already survived it. The breaking point of an avoidant usually happens long after the relationship itself has ended. From the outside, it can seem sudden, but internally it builds slowly over time. This is the moment when they can no longer emotionally outrun what they did. The numbness that once protected them stops working the way it used to. The distractions lose their effect. Work no longer fully occupies the mind. Attention from other people feels empty. Temporary escapes stop creating relief. And without realizing it, they begin emotionally returning to the relationship they spent so much time trying to avoid feeling. One of the strongest signs of this breaking point is comparison. They start comparing new people to you without meaning to. The emotional safety you offered becomes difficult to replace. Your patience starts looking rare. Your effort starts feeling unusually genuine. They begin realizing how much emotional energy you carried while they stayed emotionally guarded. And for the first time, they start seeing your exhaustion clearly. They finally understand that you were slowly breaking down while trying to keep the relationship alive. That realization changes everything internally because it forces them to confront something painful they avoided for a very long time. You did not leave because you stopped loving them. You left because loving them was destroying you. And deep down, many avoidants eventually realize that truth. Earlier in the relationship, they often understood your pain only intellectually. They heard your words, they knew you were hurt. But emotional understanding and emotional feeling are very different things. At the breaking point, the emotional understanding finally catches up. They stop analyzing the relationship from a safe emotional distance and start feeling it directly inside themselves. And that realization can crush them because they start seeing the relationship from your side instead of their own. The ignored texts suddenly look cruel instead of harmless. The emotional distance feels colder than they remembered. The delayed replies, the disappearing acts, the moments you reached for connection while they emotionally pulled away. All the times you tried explaining your loneliness while they minimized it or shut down completely. Those memories stop feeling abstract now. They become emotionally real. Many avoidants carry deep shame during this stage because they begin recognizing the emotional damage they caused someone who genuinely loved them. They replay the final phase of the relationship repeatedly in their mind. Your emotional exhaustion becomes impossible to unsee. The sadness in your voice? The moments you beg to feel emotionally safe, the quiet pain behind your patience, and for the first time, they fully feel the weight of what you carried alone while still trying to love them. This is usually the stage where the emotional walls slowly begin to crack. At first, the avoidant may still try to stay distracted and emotionally detached, but eventually the silence around them becomes harder to escape. The relationship starts returning in fragments. Small memories appear at random times during the day, a certain song, a late-night thought, an old message, a place they visited with you, and suddenly the things they pushed aside earlier begin carrying emotional weight they were unable to feel before. Your kindness becomes impossible to ignore. The patience you showed during their cold phases starts replaying in their mind differently now. Moments they once dismissed as too emotional suddenly look painfully genuine. Regret rarely hits avoidance all at once. It arrives slowly, quietly, in waves. That is why many of them continue acting normal on the outside while internally becoming more emotionally unsettled over time. They begin replaying conversations they barely cared about before. They remember the times you tried to explain your feelings calmly while they emotionally shut down. They think about the messages they ignored because responding felt emotionally overwhelming in the moment. Even the small details start haunting them. The way you waited for reassurance, the way your energy changed toward the end, the exhaustion in your voice after constantly feeling emotionally abandoned. And one memory tends to hit harder than the rest, the pain in your eyes during the final phase of the relationship. Because deep down, many avoidants knew you were hurting long before the relationship ended. They just could not fully face it emotionally at the time. Avoidants suppress guilt until emotional safety returns internally. When the nervous system is overwhelmed, survival becomes the priority. Emotional reflection comes later. That is why the guilt often appears after distance, after silence, after emotional pressure fades away. And when the nervous system finally quiets down, the memories get louder. There are fewer distractions protecting them from reflection now. Fewer emotional defenses blocking the reality of what happened. This stage can become emotionally exhausting for them in ways most people never see. Sleepless nights start happening more often. Random emotional triggers appear without warning. They may suddenly think about you during completely ordinary moments and feel an unexpected heaviness in their chest. Some begin checking old conversations repeatedly. Others feel emotionally haunted by your absence even while pretending everything is fine externally. And underneath all of it, a painful realization slowly begins forming. They hurt someone genuine. Someone who truly tried to love them through all the emotional distance they kept creating. One of the biggest emotional shifts happens when your energy suddenly disappears. For a long time, the avoidant becomes used to your presence in ways they barely notice consciously. Your texts, your emotional check-ins, your patience during their distance, your attempts to fix problems, even your sadness after their cold behavior becomes familiar to them. Over time, your love starts feeling permanent in their mind, stable, predictable. They quietly assume you will always remain emotionally connected to them no matter how distant they become. That assumption creates a dangerous emotional pattern inside the relationship. The avoidant starts relying on your emotional availability while giving less and less of their own. And because you continue reaching out, explaining yourself, trying to reconnect, and fighting for the relationship, they rarely feel the full emotional weight of losing you. Then one day something changes. You stop chasing. The long emotional paragraphs disappear. The repeated attempts to fix everything become silent. You stop reacting to their distance. You stop asking for reassurance. The emotional access they always had to you suddenly feels blocked. And that shift creates something avoidants secretly struggle deeply with. Emotional shock. At first, many avoidants try to convince themselves the silence means nothing. They assume you are simply taking space or calming down temporarily. But as the days pass, your absence starts feeling unfamiliar. The emotional energy they once relied on is gone. There is no reassurance waiting for them anymore. No emotional safety net. No guarantee that you are still emotionally attached. And that is usually the moment the relationship finally starts becoming real to them. Avoidants often notice your absence long before they admit they miss you. That is why they may suddenly start checking your social media, rereading old conversations, thinking about random memories, or feeling emotionally unsettled without fully understanding why. Your silence removes a form of emotional control they unconsciously depended on. Before, they knew they could pull away and still feel your emotional presence waiting nearby, but now the emotional mirror disappears. The person reflecting love, patience, and emotional effort back to them is suddenly gone. That absence creates a kind of emotional emptiness many avoidants are not prepared for, because distance only feels safe when connection still exists in the background. Once the connection feels truly unreachable, the nervous system begins reacting differently. The relationship stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like loss. And sometimes the avoidant only starts feeling the relationship after losing access to it. The confusing part about an avoidant partner is that right after the conflict, breakup, or emotional disconnection, they often look completely fine. While the other person is crying, overthinking, losing sleep, and replaying every painful moment in their head, the avoidant can seem calm, distant, and emotionally unaffected. That emotional contrast leaves many people deeply confused. They start believing the relationship never mattered to the avoidant at all. But the reality underneath is usually far more complicated. Avoidants are trained to escape emotional overwhelm before they fully process it. Their nervous system reacts to intense closeness almost like pressure building inside the body. When emotions become too heavy, too vulnerable, or too emotionally demanding, their brain immediately searches for relief. and relief usually comes through distance. That is why after arguments or emotionally intense moments, avoidants often feel temporary peace instead of heartbreak. Space gives their nervous system a sense of control again. The emotional pressure fades for a while. Their mind starts creating explanations that justify the withdrawal. They tell themselves they needed space. They convince themselves the relationship became too much. Sometimes they even believe leaving was the only option they had left. These thoughts feel real to them in the moment because avoidance is deeply connected to self-protection. Many avoidants learned early in life that depending too much on emotions or closeness created stress, disappointment, or emotional exhaustion. So instead of sitting with painful feelings, they disconnect from them first. This is why avoidants usually disconnect emotionally before they process emotional consequences. They separate themselves from the pain before the pain fully reaches them, and during that phase, they often bury themselves in distractions. Some people walk away from love so calmly that it almost feels unreal. No tears, no panic, no desperate attempt to fix things, just distance, silence, cold replies, and a slow disappearance that leaves the other person carrying all the pain alone. Avoidants usually leave long before they fully feel the damage they caused. In the beginning, space feels like freedom to them. Emotional distance feels safe. They convince themselves the relationship became too heavy, too emotional, too demanding. So they detach, they shut down. And while the person who loved them is left replaying every conversation and blaming themselves for everything that went wrong, the avoidant seems completely unaffected. But that emotional escape does not last forever, because eventually something changes inside them. The silence becomes louder than the arguments ever were, the distractions stop working, the emotional numbness begins to crack, and for the first time, they start seeing the relationship from a completely different angle. The terrifying part is that this realization usually comes very late, long after the damage has already been done, long after the person they pushed away stopped begging to be understood. Many people believe avoidants simply stop caring and move on easily, but psychology tells a very different story. Deep emotional suppression can delay guilt for weeks, months, sometimes even years. That is why many avoidants appear emotionally calm after a breakup while secretly carrying unresolved emotions underneath the surface. Their nervous system protects them from emotional overload by creating distance first and processing feelings later. And when those feelings finally return, they return hard. In this video, you will learn why avoidants emotionally disconnect during relationships, why they often realize your value after losing you, and what actually happens during the breaking point of an avoidant partner. You will understand the hidden emotional cycle that most people never see. We are going to talk about the delayed guilt avoidance experience, the silent emotional triggers that begin haunting them, and the painful moment they finally recognize the heartbreak they caused. There are also lesser-known psychological patterns that explain why avoidants frequently come back after long periods of silence, and why many of them struggle deeply after realizing the person they lost truly loved them. By the end of this video, you will understand why the avoidance emotional collapse rarely happens during the relationship itself. It happens afterward, quietly, internally, and sometimes when it is already too late to repair anything. This video may completely change the way you see avoidant behavior and help you finally understand the painful confusion many people carry after loving someone emotionally unavailable. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy deep relationship psychology, emotional truths, and powerful insights into human behavior, make sure to subscribe and join us for more videos like this.